I'd bet that right now your brain probably has, I don't know, about a dozen mental tabs open. Like you're listening to this deep dive, but you might also be thinking about an email you need to send, or what's for dinner, or some news headline you just saw.
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, we're all doing that constantly.
Right. And if you're the kind of person who tunes into things like this, you're probably someone who loves gathering information. You're trying to absorb new perspectives, stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah, you want to be well informed.
Exactly. And we usually think that makes us smart. Like, we treat a full mind as a really good thing. We assume a brain that's just packed with facts and opinions and analysis is, well, it's a healthy, active brain.
It's the standard metric for intelligence in our society, really.
Yeah. But today we're looking at a pretty advanced philosophical framework that argues, and this is wild, it argues that your full mind is actually making you blind.
Which is a massive shift in how we typically approach the world.
Totally. We're going to explore this radical concept where profound power and immense practical utility actually comes from being completely, entirely empty.
Yeah, and our source material for this today is an excerpt from a text called Always Remain in the Zero State, which is subtitled Advanced Cultivation. It's by a writer named Su Feng.
And so the whole mission of this deep dive today is to unpack this specific philosophical concept, right? This zero state. And to see how understanding absolutely everything.
Right, but before we even get into the high-level spiritual implications of that, we really have to talk about how this author grounds the concept.
Because nothingness usually sounds like, I don't know, something a guru whispers to you on top of a mountain.
Exactly. It doesn't sound like a practical tool you can use when you're prepping for a stressful meeting or trying to manage your life.
Yeah. But the text actually starts by looking at the physical mechanics of everyday objects to explain this ancient wisdom, which I found so helpful.
That physical grounding is crucial. Basically, Feng synthesizes three legendary philosophical frameworks into one operational concept. He brings together Laozi's idea of effortless action.
Oh, right, Taoism.
Yeah, exactly. And then the Buddhist concept of formlessness, and finally Cancun Chu's principle of the middle way.
Which, for anyone unfamiliar, the middle way is essentially the practice of avoiding extreme dogmas, right? Like finding a balanced, centered reality.
Spot on. So the author argues that all three of these massive historical ideas are actually pointing to the exact same thing, the zero state. And to prove it, he uses the mechanics of measuring instruments.
Like scales and stuff.
Yeah. Think about a giant scale used to weigh cargo, or a gauge used to measure electrical current.
Yeah.
For any of those instruments to be useful, they have a strict physical requirement.
They have to start at zero.
Exactly.
I mean, if I'm baking, it's the exact same mechanism as hitting the tare button on a digital kitchen scale. Like, if I'm trying to measure out, say, 200 grams of flour, I put my heavy glass mixing bowl on the scale first.
Right. You need the vessel.
But if I don't hit the tare button to zero out the weight of that specific bowl, my measurement is totally useless. I'm measuring the bowl and the ingredients together.
And your cake is going to be a dense, salty disaster.
Exactly. You have to zero out the vessel to understand the reality of what you're actually putting into it.
That baking scale is a brilliant starting point. And Feng actually pushes that vessel concept even further into the architecture around us. Consider just a simple drinking cup.
Okay.
The material might be beautiful ceramic or expensive glass, but the cup only functions as a cup because it's empty inside.
Right.
The emptiness is what gives it utility. You can't pour fresh, hot tea into a cup that's already packed to the brim with mud.
Oh, that makes sense.
And the philosophy applies this to buildings as well. A house is defined by its walls and its roof, sure, but it only provides true value to human beings because of the empty space inside those walls.
The emptiness is where you actually live and work and breathe. So in this framework, emptiness isn't a lack of something. It's not like a void where something went missing. Emptiness is the active capacity for something to happen.
Yes. And that shift in definition is how we start to really understand Laozi's famous paradox of effortless action that accomplishes everything.
How so?
Well, when a physical object is in the zero state, it isn't forcing an outcome. The empty cup isn't trying to be tea. It's simply providing the perfect, unbiased, empty space for the reality of the tea to occur.
Okay, so if the physical world requires emptiness to function, like the bowl on the scale or the space in a room, what happens when we move from physical weight to mental weight?
That's where things get really challenging.
Yeah, because this is where the text introduces a quote from a spiritual entity or voice that it refers to as Kin Celestial. And I was genuinely stuck on this quote for a bit.
You're referring to the lines about perception, I assume.
Yes. The quote goes, let me make sure I have it right. Buddha nature is tasteless. The greatest creator is soundless. Lack of perception is the greatest perception.
It's a heavy quote.
It is. And as someone who reads constantly to stay informed, that sounds like terrible advice.
I can see why you say that.
Lack of perception just sounds like sticking your head in the sand. Like, if my goal in life is to read the room, spot trends, be aware of my surroundings, how is ignorance supposed to be a superpower?
Well, it sounds completely counterintuitive, sure, but only if we assume perception means actively grabbing onto the world and holding it.
Right, which is what we usually mean.
Yeah, but the author isn't advocating for blindness. The text is advocating for a blank slate mind. And to explain the mechanism of how this works, the author uses two incredibly vivid natural metaphors.
The bamboo in the pond.
Exactly. The passage reads, "As the wind passes through sparse bamboo, the bamboo retains no sound. As geese fly over a cold pond, the pond leaves no reflection."
The bamboo retains no sound. That paints a very clear picture.
Look at the actual physics of that image. When a storm rolls in, the wind blows through the bamboo forest. The bamboo experiences the wind perfectly, right?
Yeah, it rustles, it bends.
It makes a tremendous noise in the exact moment the wind is present. It is fully perceiving reality. But the millisecond the wind stops, the bamboo is completely silent again.
It doesn't hold on to the sound.
Right. It doesn't hold on to the sound of the wind from 5 minutes ago, and it doesn't worry about the wind that might come tomorrow.
Wow, okay.
And the pond operates the exact same way. It reflects the flock of geese with perfect, crystal clear accuracy while they're directly overhead. But once they fly past the horizon, the pond lets the image go.
It just returns to being a perfect mirror.
Exactly. Ready to reflect the clouds or the moon or whatever comes next.
Okay, I really see the difference now. So lack of perception doesn't mean you fail to see the geese.
No, not at all.
It means you don't stare at the empty sky, obsessing over the memory of the geese after they're already gone.
Spot on. But the human mind usually does the exact opposite of the pond. We see the geese, and immediately we start thinking, where are they migrating? Is winter coming early? Man, I hate winter. I really need to buy a new winter coat.
And winter coats are so expensive right now because of inflation.
Right. And suddenly we're stressed about the global economy, and we aren't even looking at the pond anymore.
We've completely lost our connection to the present reality.
Because we grabbed onto a single perception and refused to let it pass through us.
We took a simple reflection and turned it into, like, a massive background process, which brings up a huge point of friction because human beings naturally want to hold on to things.
We're collectors by nature.
Yeah. If we see a beautiful reflection, we want to photograph it, frame it, keep it forever. So what happens, according to this philosophy, when we refuse to let the wind just pass through? What happens when we start hoarding all these mental attachments?
Well, Xifeng is uncompromising on this point. The text issues a massive warning about the danger of clinging. It states explicitly that clinging to any specific matter, thing, theory, religion, political party, nation, family, or person is a deviation from the Tao.
That is.
It actively pulls you out of the zero state.
I really want to pause on that list because it is staggering. I mean, it's completely normal for a philosophy to say, don't cling to money, don't cling to material possessions. We've all heard that.
Sure, that's standard.
But this author is saying, don't cling to theories, don't cling to political parties or religions. He even includes nations and families. That is a radically different lens to view the world through.
It absolutely is.
He's essentially arguing that the very structures we use to build our identities, where we find our meaning, those are traps.
And the philosophy goes even deeper than identity. The author asserts that when you view the world from this ultimate zero state, humanity's entire framework of values and morals is revealed to be mistaken.
Mistaken.
Yes. The text claims that all human suffering is man-made. It's a direct result of straying from the zero state and attaching ourselves to rigid, temporary concepts.
So by picking a side, we're creating our own pain.
Exactly. When we decide a specific political party is the only path to goodness, or a specific theory is the absolute truth, we essentially freeze the water in the pond. We lose the ability to reflect anything new.
Looking at the logic of the framework, that makes a terrifying kind of sense. Like, if the ideal state is the perfectly clear, still pond, then clinging to a rigid ideology is like tossing a giant boulder into the water.
That's a great way to picture it.
You stir up all the mud at the bottom, you create endless chaotic ripples, and suddenly you just can't reflect anything accurately anymore. Every single thing you look at is distorted by the ripples of your own attachments.
And that distortion is the very definition of suffering in this context. When you're fiercely attached to a specific nation or a rigid belief system, you're no longer in a state of formlessness. You aren't practicing effortless action.
You're just exhausted.
You're in a state of constant, exhausting friction. You're fighting against the natural, ever-changing flow of the universe because you're trying to make a temporary reflection permanent.
You're basically demanding that the geese stay in the sky forever.
Yeah, exactly. Which is impossible.
The text mentions briefly that a computer can only function effectively for people when it is in the zero state. And that analogy really clipped for me when I was trying to understand the physical toll of this suffering.
How so?
Well, think about a laptop that's completely bogged down by too many open applications. You have your political ideology application running, right? And it's taking up huge amounts of processing power.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you have your past resentments, cached files, eating up all your memory. You have 40 different browser tabs open with theories and opinions you're desperately clinging to. What happens to the machine?
I mean, the cooling fan starts screaming, every keystroke lags, the battery drains in 20 minutes, and eventually the entire system just crashes.
System crashes. In this analogy, human suffering is basically just a drained battery from way too many background processes.
That's a perfect modern translation of the concept.
Right, because when we cling to all these human structures, when we define ourselves by our jobs, our politics, our grievances, our mental RAM is maxed out. We don't have any processing power left to actually experience the present moment.
We're too busy running the old programs.
Exactly. But that begs the question of the mechanism. How do we actually clear the cache? Like, if I'm sitting here with 40 mental tabs open, how does this philosophy suggest I hate Control-Alt-Delete?
Well, the mechanism is observation without participation.
Yeah.
The text suggests that returning to the zero state isn't about violently fighting your thoughts.
Okay, so no forceful deleting.
Right, because if you fight the ripples in the pond with your hands, you just make more ripples. Instead, clearing the cache requires you to simply notice the urge to cling and let it dissolve.
So you just watch it happen.
Yeah, you watch the thought arise. Maybe it's a flash of anger about a political theory, and instead of feeding it energy, you treat it like the wind in the bamboo. You let it make its noise, and then you let it pass. You force quit the background applications by simply withdrawing your attachment to them.
So let's say someone actually manages to pull this off. They clear the cache. They stop clinging to their rigid human structures. What does achieving this zero state actually look like in practice?
That's the real question, isn't it?
Yeah, because I'll be honest, when you first hear words like absolute nothingness, it sounds incredibly bleak. It sounds like sitting in a blank, gray room, staring at a white wall, feeling completely numb to the world.
And that is actually the most common pitfall when Western audiences encounter philosophies that emphasize emptiness.
Mm.
But Shuofeng is very careful to dismantle that misconception.
So it's not a void.
No, the author explicitly states the zero state is not a dead, empty void. Quoting Cancun Celestial again, the text refers to the zero state as the root of life. It's described as holding the mysteries of heaven and earth, containing endless transformations and bursting with countless phenomena.
It's less like a dark room and more like a vibrant, buzzing source of raw energy.
Precisely the opposite of a void. To illustrate what this looks like in practice, the text outlines the highest levels of mastery that emerge from this state, and it uses a series of pretty profound paradoxes.
Okay, what kind of paradoxes?
It states the highest level of swordsmanship is the absence of a sword. The ultimate mental practice is to be without a mind. The most profound Buddha Dharma is to be without Buddha. And the greatest self is the absence of self.
Wow. Let's break those down, starting with the highest swordsmanship is the absence of a sword.
Sure.
Because if you're a warrior clinging tightly to your sword, like if you genuinely believe your power and your safety only come from this specific piece of sharpened metal in your hand, you're severely limited.
You're entirely reliant on a single tool.
Right. If someone knocks it out of your hand, you're defeated. But if you achieve the absence of a sword, your mind is free. You adapt to the reality of the moment. A heavy branch becomes a sword. A defensive pivot becomes a sword. Your entire awareness becomes the martial art, rather than just relying on the metal object.
Exactly. When you drop the rigid tool, you gain the capacity to use the whole world. And
Yeah.
Feng applies this exact same logic to our spiritual and mental lives.
Like being without Buddha.
Right. To be without Buddha doesn't mean rejecting enlightenment. It means avoiding the trap of worshiping the finger that points at the moon instead of looking at the moon itself.
Oh, I've heard that phrase before.
Yeah. If you cling to the rigid dogma, the rituals, or the statues of a religion, you miss the actual enlightened nature those things were trying to teach you in the first place.
That makes total sense. And what about the greatest self is the absence of self? That one feels particularly relevant today. I mean, we spend so much time building our personal brands, defending our egos, curating our identities online. What does it actually mean in a modern context to practice the absence of self?
Think about a professional in a high-stakes meeting. If they enter that room with a massive, fragile ego, a really strong sense of self, they spend the entire meeting defending that identity. If someone challenges their idea, they take it as a personal attack. They get defensive, they argue, and they miss the actual solution. They're heavy.
Yeah, we've all worked with that person.
Exactly. But someone practicing the absence of self enters the room. They don't have a rigid narrative to defend. If their idea is flawed, they just drop it immediately and pivot to a better one. By having no ego to protect, they become infinitely adaptable and incredibly effective.
They are the empty cup, ready to receive whatever the moment actually requires.
Yes, and that adaptability is what leads to the ultimate payoff of this advanced cultivation. Feng describes the result of living in the zero state as achieving the unity between heaven and humanity.
That sounds like quite the payoff.
He calls it the state of the greatest creator, and notes that it offers the most exquisite awareness possible in life.
But why is it the most exquisite awareness? I mean, what makes it so special?
Because, as the text concludes, when you reside in the zero state, it is only then that you can perceive absolutely everything.
Ah. Which perfectly closes the loop on that earlier quote about lack of perception. By not focusing obsessively on one tiny specific thing, by not letting your mind get trapped on the reflection of one passing goose, you open up your peripheral vision to take in the entire sky.
Exactly.
By zeroing out the scale, you prepare yourself to weigh the universe.
It really is the ultimate evolution, moving from being a rigid container that's already full to becoming the open, expansive space in which all things can exist and transform.
So what is the practical takeaway for you, the person listening to this right now, navigating a world of absolute information overload?
It's a lot to process.
It is. We're constantly pressured to accumulate more facts, to take a firm stance on every issue, to plant our flag in a political party, and to fiercely defend our little plot of mental real estate. We're told a full mind is a strong mind.
But the text offers a completely different path.
Yeah. The text we explored today offers a radical alternative. The shortcut to truly understanding the world isn't about filling your cup until it inevitably overflows and makes a mess. It's about deliberately, consciously emptying it.
Right.
It's about noticing when you are clinging to a theory or an identity and choosing to hit the tear button on your own mind. You have to recalibrate your assumptions back to zero so you can accurately measure what is actually right in front of you without the heavy distortion of your own attachments.
It requires immense discipline to remain empty, of course. But as Feng outlines, the clarity you gain is worth letting go of the noise.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, there is one final, easily missed detail from the text that I want to leave you with. When the author is listing all the physical examples of the zero state, the empty cup, the idling machinery, he includes one line that completely reframed how I think about being empty.
Oh, the energy differential part.
Yes. The text says, the state of energy differentials is likewise a form of zero state, ready to unleash immense power in an instant.
An energy differential is such a fascinating physical state. Consider a tightly stretched rubber band or a massive boulder perched at the very edge of a cliff, or a fully charged battery that isn't currently plugged into a device.
Right.
From the outside observation, they're completely still. They're in a state of non-action. They appear to be at zero.
They look like they're doing absolutely nothing. But in reality, they're holding a massive vibrating amount of potential energy. The emptiness isn't a lack of power, it's the absolute concentrated peak of power, just waiting for the circuit to close.
It's the heavy, silent moment right before the lightning strikes.
Man, that's good. So here's the thought I want you to mull over today. The next time you find yourself feeling completely empty, maybe you're staring at a blank screen at work, or you feel totally uninspired, or you're just sitting on your couch feeling like your mind is idling and stuck at zero.
We usually judge ourselves so harshly for those moments.
We do. We think we're failing because we aren't producing content or consuming data or aggressively moving forward. But what if that isn't a moment of stagnation at all?
What if it's the rubber band stretching?
Exactly. What if, like that energy differential, your empty mind is just gathering immense power? What if it's waiting for the exact right moment to be unleashed? You haven't stalled out. You've just stepped out of the muddy waters of your own mind, cleared the cache, and hit the tear button. Your scale is perfectly balanced, and you are finally ready to measure whatever comes next.